let's see. I'm guessing that you don't want to see my email, but you might want to see the keynote. Let's see. It appears that previously announced we're doing sort of morning announcements in a distributed fashion, and I took the liberty of transforming some of them into a PowerPoint. It is 9:15. The first sessions start at 9:30, so we should be able to cover this in about 5 minutes.
I will be covering some small code examples, but sort of the nitty-gritty of how this code is implemented. We went over some of that during the Birds of Feather session yesterday, and we'll be sprinting on this topic this weekend. So if you're here for a very technical analysis of the calendaring, this is probably not the talk that you want to be at. It's about getting dates, though, which, depending how you look at it, could be considered a community problem. We're not sure. It's about calendaring, though.
Certainly not a technical one.
Yeah.
There are technical ways to approach every problem.
Some are more successful than others, though. Okay, I guess it's a go sign. My name is Aaron Vanderlip, and let me adjust this. I work with Jazzcarta. We're a Boston-based consulting company. The title of this talk today was Getting Dates with Plone, so I was hoping I'd really reel some people in, sort of the ambiguous title, sort of the promise of something. It's a little early for a lot of people. I was stopped by security this morning coming in the building, and they were quite insistent to show me something on the x-ray and for me to identify the green translucent box on the x-ray to tell them what it was. I don't remember packing any green translucent boxes, so I was a bit flummoxed to tell them what it is. Turned out it was my notebook. Yeah, so we're all safer. No stray paper ever made into the building. So getting dates with Plone. So what is this really about? It's about Plone for Artists calendar mostly, but there's a lot under the hood of that product. Or bonnet if you like to, if you need the translation. So I'm going to talk probably the first 10 or 15 minutes about some of the technical architecture, so some of the products that are involved, some of their technologies that are involved in putting this together, because I think a lot of those technologies are developed by some pretty smart folks, and they have a lot of reuse cases. And I think even as an integrator, since integrators tend to be writing at least some compatibility or customization code, that they should be sort of aware of the parts that are involved in the product. So I will do that. I will show, after sort of the technical overview, I will show sort of the tool in action as it sort of works as an installed product. And then I will show a minor sort of customization you would use to slightly extend the user interface of the tool. But one more thing before I start, who's in this audience? Raise your hand if you develop, if you're an integrator or sort of see yourself as more of an integrator, okay? And more of a developer, okay? So there's always going to be some overlap. Okay, so it's still a mixed group. So let's get started. Oh, and the other thing I should bring up is that I'm actually presenting other people's software. So a lot of this work was done by Leonard Regebro and Rocky Burt. They did, and then there have been contributors to this stack, but they've really done sort of the lion's share of work in terms of coding and doing some of the future development that make this, I think, a compelling stack of software to use in calendaring. So a bit of background. First, there was Plone for Artists calendar, and it was a bit of a monolith. It was really sort of, it started out sort of as a ZOAP 2.0, 2 dot product. A lot of integrated pieces went together to sort of make everything happen, and it sort of grew organically from that. Leonard decided, I think earlier this year, to sort of tackle it and sort of, in his words, sort of rip the thing apart, refactor it, just sort of make the whole thing more reusable and not make it so tied to a specific product and implementation. So since he's not here, but I'm presenting his work, I just want to give a little clap, so if he watches this video, that we all recognize the tremendous amount of work that Leonard's done for the plone community. So thanks, Leonard. So I'll go over the overview. So when you install the P4A calendar, there are there are 5 key packages that come along with that. So when you add this to your build out, you get some of these other tools installed as eggs. Datable.chronos, Datable.calends, the P4A subtyper, the P4A.plone calendar, and the P4A event. The first 2 items really represent the Datable package really represents a lot of the work that Leonard has done to refactor this entire code stack and to make more generic sort of calendaring infrastructure so it can be reused in other apps. So when I first started planning for this talk, originally Rocky Burt was going to tag along, and sort of we were going to do a co-presentation, and he was going to handle maybe some of the more technical questions about the implementation of it. But since he's not here either, I sort of asked, hey Leonard, can you give me sort of a map of what this thing looks like in your mind? So here's Leonard's map. What this really shows is that the parts of the user interface have been abstracted out of the plone4a calendar project and are now in something called Datable.chronos. So Datable.chronos is currently not terribly plone dependent. It still has a few plone dependencies in terms of the viewlet code, because it actually calls named plone viewlet managers, but that could also be abstracted away at some point. But ultimately, Datable.chronos only really cares about if you hand it something called an event provider, which is sort of a list or collection of events. Datable.chronos will create these sort of monthly, daily, or weekly views for you. The Datable.calends interface is just an interface package. There's really no code there. So they're designed for you to implement those interfaces in order to extend things to be used with a Datable.chronos. So if you look at Datable.calends and you implement those interfaces, you should be able to use Datable.chronos without very much additional work. The core of the work will be for you to define your own sort of event providers, these things that sort of gather up your events and deliver them to the calendar interface. P4A calendar, plone calendar, can be sort of seen as an actual implementation of the top 2 packages. So it's actually providing a working calendar. So you can use it as sort of a piece of example code. And additionally, it provides some other utilities that I'll talk about later. And then there's P4A plone event, which is an extension of the event type. So what really Leonard did was he took what sort of looked like this, which was sort of a mix mash of all these different pieces, and made failure on resolution. This is a screenshot from 2001. So it's space food. So you have your neatly compartmentalized food items with all this like really handy straw interface. So that's sort of a way to look at sort of the work that Leonard's done, is taking this big mess, or this big sort of lump of code, divided it out and provided ways to sort of reuse it. Just check the time. Yeah, so Datable.chronos, again, it's a package to give you calendar views. You use it to call event providers to it. So if you have an event provider, something that's going to handle off your events, Datable knows how to display it. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it's reusable outside of Plone for artists. The P4A plone calendar. That's actually P4A.plone calendar. That's an error in the slide. But it basically registers folders and topic types to implement possible calendar, and that will be sort of important later. But basically, it adds some registration via ZCML to those types, and it provides some hooks for importing and exporting of iCal feeds. I'll demonstrate some of that later. And it implements the necessary CalEnz interfaces for event providers. So P4A actually has all the code that will gather up the necessary events and then provide that set of events to datable.chronos in order for it to be displayed. The next piece that I'm going to talk about was created primarily by Rocky Burt. So we have to give him a remote clap as well. Yay, Rocky Burt. He's also a plone and Zope hero. He is primarily, he's done a lot of work on the P4A suite, but the particular piece that I just want to sort of point out in the stack is the P4A subtyper. So what subtyper is it's basically a piece of infrastructure that allows you to give people that are sort of site admins access to marker interfaces that you want them to be able to apply to their objects. Currently, I think the way that you there's not a real clean way for someone to go through and add a marker interface, even if it's part of your story. I mean, we want to be adding marker interfaces to extend our objects. It's very powerful. And Rocky basically had 4 or 5 different ways of implementing this, and then he decided, I'm going to make it generic, and I'm going to provide a way for people to reuse this. So you can look at the example, and you can see that you can register your types for use in the UI. If that particular object implements that interface, those marker interfaces become available on a menu, and that'll be sort of obvious when I demonstrate the software. And then the final piece is the P4A.event. So it's important that this implements the recurring event interface. This is really important for recurring events. It wraps these objects using a factory. This factory is registered in the ZCML. And it uses schema extender to add the necessary reoccurrence information to the event type. So basically, it takes the default event type, it registers a new factory for it, and just adds, using schema extender, adds the necessary information to the object. So you're not having to subclass the actual event type. You're just saying, each time we create an event, we're going to add a little bit of additional data in order to support recurring events. Trajectory-wise, probably, I think recurring events, it's so obvious, such an obvious use case that it should be part of, any sort of core calendaring tool that we're using in Plone. I think that having it as a separate add-on, at least for the recurring piece, it's really crucial. So I definitely would like to see that in action. Recurrence is cool. I mean, right now, what happens is that if you want to have an event in Plone and you want it to span 3 days, starts on Monday and starts on Wednesday, well, what oftentimes site admins will do is they'll make one event and they'll choose the start day and the stop day, like starting on the 15th, ending on the 18th. But really what that stores in the back end is that is like a 72-hour event, basically. And so, or the other option is that once they figure out that that's not really what they want to do, they have to go and create 3 exact same event types in order to register those separately. So if, just kind of doing the thought experiment, that's just not a really good solution. We can really do better. So I'm going to demo the tools a little bit. I'm going to mark up some types. I'm going to import some external data, and I'm going to build a small app very quickly. What time does this talk get over? When I'm done? Well, I can be done right now. This is work. So to get, I'm just going to sort of make up a scenario. So you're in charge of a website for a gallery. So you've convinced your boss of the gallery that you were going to use Plone, and one of the things that he wants is he wants to calendar events. So your boss is like, he's already on you because he's really not happy with the look and feel of the site. He really thinks it's minimalist, so he really wants you to start skinning it as well. He says it looks like every other plone site he's seen. He's not very happy. So here we have a basically a folder with a bunch of event objects, but currently we are somewhat limited by the views that we can apply to it. Sort of these are the standard views. Here's that the subtyper piece that I talked about. So when I engage this, what happens is that let me get this right. Yeah, so an event is fired off, and then this object gets attached a marker interface. So right now, because we installed P4A calendar, all folders and content types have a iPossible calendar interface, and that's what tells the subtyper that, oh, calendar is one of the possible types this thing could become. And then when we set this on, it enables some of the datable interfaces, and we get these datable views. So all of this stuff here is provided by datable. All the view code at this point. So this, and then we can similarly, because we're sort of adding interfaces and removing interfaces, we're not doing any code. We can actually remove that marker, and we revert the object back to its original state. So I'll go ahead and do this. So the title of this talk was Getting Dates with Plone. So you're this website master, and you're working in this art gallery, and you really there's somebody that you've had your eye on that comes in and out of the gallery. So her name's Mel. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to convince her, like, to show up to the same drawing workshop that you're going to. You're really like, hey, Mel, there's this great, workshop you should really check out. So you go in, and you've created your drawing workshop. Now it's a 3-day workshop. It begins at approximately 1 p.m. and ends at 6. But you can see that there are some problems with this. This is basically the old style, or one method of sort of saying, like, this event spans 3 days. But you tell Mel, you're like, oh, it's going to be great, you should really show up. And Mel thinks, oh, you're an okay guy, I'll check it out. So she goes to the events calendar, and she's like, okay, I know it's on. Let me resize this for a moment. She's like, oh, that sounds really reasonable. I could spend a few hours, in the middle of my day to go to this drawing workshop. But I wonder what time it starts tomorrow. Oh man, boy, that's a little more. Well, he's a nice guy. Well, let's see. Maybe there's like a shorter class. Yeah, I don't think so. So webmaster's like, oh well, I guess I got kind of brushed off. And what happened there? Well, this is where reoccurrence comes in. This is going to help you get dates with Plone. So we're going to change. What we're really going to do is we're going to say that we know this workshop begins and ends on the same day, but it's going to be 3 days. So we'll go ahead and save that piece. So we changed it back to basically a 1-day event. And then we're going to hit the reoccurrence. This seems like some little artifact. I don't know. So here's where we can set the reoccurrence frequency. So it might be really obvious. If you want to come to the sprint, we need UI help on this piece because there's not a lot of explanation, and it could use some helper code and maybe even some slicker pieces. But we're going to say that this is a daily reoccurring event. We can set an upwards bound of the date, so it can recur. We can say that this happens every day up until an end date. We can say that it happens every first, second, or third, or fifth day. This is the interval. And we can say that it can happen every third day or every 10 days for a maximum total count of these items of like 5. So there are ways to sort of space out your events. So let's just go ahead and do what we promised. And we're going to make it a daily event happening. Ooh, that's not exactly what I want. I want this. See, again, even I'm slightly unsure of the interface because it just needs a little helper text to sort of explain some of the concepts. So. Okay. So you can see now, even our view here has changed. It's October 9th from 1 to 6 every day until the 12th. So this is, again, part of the extension that the Dateable.calend stuff gives you, is it does modify some of the language in the view to support this notion of reoccurrence. So now when Mel goes back and checks, you apologize. She's like, oh, yes, that's much more reasonable. I will definitely, hang out with you on 3 days. And it doesn't seem like, a 3-day sleepover, which was a little bit presumptuous. So that's reoccurrence. And again, I'm going to vote reoccurrence should be part of the standard date handling for plone. I think it solves just some very obvious problems that our current event and calendar implementations have. And also, and sort of slightly more technical, looking at the way that the work that Rocky and Leonard have done to extend event objects using interfaces, is that it would be very easy to create event objects that follow your own sort of reoccurrence rules. So there's ways to sort of modify, like, this event happens the first, the second, and the fifth day, for instance, or skips these days of a list, if you have a list of holidays that you want no events to fall on. So, but you don't have to go around subclassing. You can just write extensions to the event type. You can use subtyper to mark them up, this type of thing. So it's been built to be very extensible from that point of view. So the next piece I am going to show is, you're quite happy. You've got a date with Mel for this drawing workshop, but your boss comes in. He says, "Hey, what's all this messing about? We need some work done here." So he wants to syndicate. He wants to grab the events from a partner gallery and import it into your site. So because he has a business deal with them, he wants to know that although his gallery has all these workshops, he wants to pull in events from the neighboring workshop that's in the next town. So how we can do that is we can create a new folder. How's the network working today? Good? Okay. I probably won't demo because I'm still a little wary of the network. I will show you how this is implemented, but pull in a local iCalendar file and not do the remote. So these folks have an iCal feed here that we're going to pull in. So we can see that Christopher Bard is one of their artists. We've created this new folder called Remote Calendar. We want to enable the calendar, make it a calendar. So we're subtyping it. And then now we have some additional actions. We have import an iCal. And these are, again, fired off because this object supports this interface, so then it grabs other actions that are applicable to it. So here we have the import iCalendar file and import iCalendar URL. I would do the URL, but if it fails, my demo fails. So I'm going to play it safe and run this. And this takes a while. We can start something new while we're waiting for this. Okay, so something else that your boss has come in and asked you to do is that he's well impressed with all the work that you've done on the calendar thus far, but he says, well, we have painting workshops, we have drawing workshops, we have ceramic workshops. I really want to have like a list of a view that shows all the events, but for people that have very domain-specific interests, I want to be able for them to sort of just look at just things that are sort of painting. So what we can do is we can add a collection. And we'll call this painting. And then we'll mark up the, add some criteria to it. So again, this is aimed at people so we're going to have a category. And we're going to have a type, item type criteria. Oh. Sorry, it's not painting, it's workshop, lecture, exhibit is so we want to have everybody that wants to know about all the workshops, for instance. So we're going to grab I've already marked these up ahead of time to be keyed whether they are a workshop, lecture, or exhibit. We'll grab all the event types of that, hit save. And we hit view, so we should see like, okay, this is great, but because both topics, in addition to calendars, are able to be calendars, they're marked with the possible calendar interface, we can go ahead and subtype these as well. And now we have a calendar that just shows all the workshops. I'm going to change this so it's not confusing. Okay, so we can do a similar thing for lectures as well. And really, if you can extend, just by implementing the interfaces that are described in Calends, you can create calendar views on any types of objects. You just have to understand what the interface is asking for and fulfill the contract of the interface. So again, it's a very extensible way to make your content objects or your application event aware. So got this one. You can see that this import is still running in the background. And view. And then we want to again make it subtyper. And now we have these two pieces as well. Okay, so now here's where my talk just fell apart. I was supposed to show you that you're missing a UI element here because there's an add-on product that I created, so I'll go ahead and explain it, sort of going back in time. So your boss comes in here and he's wondering, okay, it's great, you've got all these views, but when I go to the main calendar, I can't see any of the subtypes that you've selected. So what I did for this piece is I defined a very basic, I created a theme product, defined a very, this is sort of like web developer in a hurry because he's thinking oh, I really want to go out with Mel and I don't really want to do things properly, so I'm going to write a bunch of Python get folder stuff here and hard code the path, and I'm just going to be done with it and have drinks at 6. But ultimately you should do something a little bit cleaner than that. Do not follow my example. But in my theme product that I've created, I've added just this view-let code. So instead of mucking about and trying to get like all these extra templates and stuff on top of calendar and then forking calendar in order to support, just this little piece of navigation that you want to add. I just say for objects that implement this interface, iCalendar enhanced, I'm going to use this viewlet that I sort of sniffed out using the manage viewlet syntax so I could see where it was. Use this manager and punch in that piece of template code. And then you're done, you're a hero, and your boss is not angry with you. So again, that's just a way to leverage this tool, leverage collections, and you can build, somewhat useful calendar or calendar tools or things that are pulling in data and just using collections of smart folders and these types of things in order to parse out your data. So it's a kind of a way, like if you have a pretty savvy, reasonably savvy site administrator, they can really be self-supporting when they get new requests for slicing and dicing the calendar, the dates for either for an internet or for an external facing website. I could hear my fan running the whole time. This is finally done. So this is that import from that iCalendar file. And what that does is pulls in all the calendar pieces from that iCal feed. We could have got it also from the URL. I just didn't want to necessarily have it fail because of the network connection, but it does. We could do it again if we have time. The nice thing about this import feature is that if you look down at this lower URL bar, these are all have a unique ID that's basically a hash based on the imported data. So when you re-import this calendar, it only overwrites your objects if actually the data's changed and you don't get duplicates. So it's very well thought out and it works quite well. Similarly, you can pull stuff out using this export iCal piece as well.
Sorry. So if the ID is a hash based on data, so if data change, the hash will change.
Right. So you might get a different object there because what it means is that if you import that calendar twice, it won't either duplicate the object or override it unless there's actually new data that's changed. So it's creating a hash-based, unique ID based on the hash of the data that's coming in. And so then when you import the calendar, it looks at all the event objects and asks, did this change? And if it changed, it updates it. If it doesn't, it just ignores the import. So it's not perfect, but it's a way to keep you from not being afraid from re-importing your data, because more often than not, it should work. I will say that the iCal importing stuff and the exporting tools, that's an area that probably Plone in general could benefit from, because I think that my understanding from talking to Leonard and Rocky is that the existing infrastructure is okay, but there's probably better, maybe more generic Python tools that we can use for managing iCal data. That's the end of my talk. I will try to answer questions that are asked. Yes?
When you import from the web, is there any chance that it would sync live? Like, for instance, if I subscribe to a living calendar that something's adding to somewhere else, will it update that calendar, or is it a one-time import?
Currently, the iCal is a one-time import. There are apps like, for instance, Sunbird, that I can add things in here that will sync. This app is rich enough to sync the publication of data to the Plone iCal feed. So when I update it'll update that as well. But the actual Plone piece is not that sophisticated. So you might treat just the Plone piece as a repository for the data, but do the management, in sort of a more richer, dedicated iCal app. Does that answer your question? Okay. In the back?
Does the recurrence, is that maintained from when you import and export?
No. That's, again, an area that has to be, if you import iCal data that has reoccurring events, the current imports do not support recurrence data. So that's, again, something that can be worked on for the sprint, and something, we should have a really rich and powerful iCal import export story, I think, and any work we can do to improve that would be greatly appreciated.
What about keywords on iCal? Is there any support or structure for that?
It depends. Again, I'm not sure that the current because because of the iCal spec, I'm not sure currently how much of the iCal data maps over to what gets imported as an event. You could certainly, you could write a mapper, or you could extend it to map things on the import. But again, right now the iCal implementation is somewhat basic. You.
Kind of two things real quick. In the collection version of it,
Uh-huh.
read only, like the plus sign, the add buttons are off. And I'm wondering if in the instance that you apply the marker interface to a collection,
Mm-hmm.
if there could be an extra data set that says events added are added to this location, and then you could inspect the criteria so that if the criteria was looking for a given keyword, you could actually add it and assign that keyword to it.
Yeah, I mean, so the question's somewhat about the UI and enhancing the UI and making sure. I mean, right now, actually, when you mark something up as a calendar on like a collection, the UI it's a little bit more challenging to maneuver around. So that's sort of one of the drawbacks currently with just the calendar being applied to topics, is that some of the maneuvering around of to get back and editing and changing the rules is a little bit more challenging. So that's an area of improvement. In terms of like sort of this add interface, Leonard has basically said, I'm not a UI person, so he's provided the work, all the infrastructure for it, and he's very willing to take on anyone that has like, KSS, JavaScript skills, UI skills to take a stab, and I'm sure he will be very, very thankful to accept those types of contributions. Yes?
Not about this exactly, but one of the things that's bothered me about plone for a while is the fact that you only have one time zone. So if you have people who work in multiple places,
Right.
everybody sees Eastern, or do you know if anybody's doing anything about that, where you can set a profile,
Right.
set a time zone, things like that?
I was wondering if there was some override. Time zones make my head hurt. I ran into a bug with some importing of RSS feeds, and then I realized, wow, there's like 504 different time zone indicators, and it's all really bound up in politics. I don't have a good answer for managing time zones between what the server tells you the time is, what plone tells you what the time is, what your particular Python script tells you what time it is. I don't have a good answer because I don't understand it technically enough to know. Question? Would be color coding of events. Well, I mean, you could think of a formula where you inspect, the category of the event and apply some CSS file to it, but there's not any current implementation that supports that. But that would be probably pretty basic to do. Anything else?
Yeah.
Yes.
The subtyper versus the display drop-down.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of wondering if those two could potentially be merged to where the display is essentially applying a marker interface, and then also along with a display you can get annotations that allow you to configure aspects of that display. Like they seem kind of duplicate in functionality at some point.
Although, true, I think though, in my mind, and I guess that this is also my bias, is that maybe subtypes is not the best UI way to name that, but I would like to think of, for my users, I'd like to think of them as like sort of distinct elements. So like they have an event and they have like super event, or they have a folder, and then they have like, if this was just said like make calendar and was a button, that would be an improvement. I think maybe mapping over the changing of a type, which has a whole bunch of functionality, additional functionality added to it, with the display menu, which is more about just displaying differences on the same object. I think it might confuse the separation for people. I could be totally wrong, but in my mind, I don't agree that, I do see that subtypes is like, that's for us, that's developer, kind of developer-facing usage, but I think keeping it like as a separate action is probably where I would want to keep it. Anyone else?
I just wanted to add about time zones that Leonard has also looked at just first Python trying to solve
Yeah.
Python stuff, and
It's It's impossible.
Very long blog post explaining why he couldn't just express time zones directly in time.
Yeah, if everyone used universal time, and that would be fine. But every nationality wants their own time zone and all of these things. So and then coders, because they have it's even the RFCs. Like it's all over the place. Like there's all these different time zone implementations. So it's sort of those, dates and times should be one of those things that just works. But we're going to probably keep fighting it for a while. So I don't have a good solution. But you're right, Leonard did a lot. He put out this script that said, download this to your local system, run it, tell me what you get back. And so he could look at like what the Python install was, what the operating system was, and his conclusion was there is no consistent way to get that information that's 100% accurate. Yes?
If you wanted to get involved in like, this project that can't do sprints,
Mm-hmm.
you do conferences, do you have like, how do you get involved in
Email Leonard.
Okay.
Or you can email me, and I will email Leonard. Because Leonard you get very short responses back. You may write something very long, and he'll say yes back to you. But he will accept. He will absolutely be excited to have people working on it, because he's done like pulling everything out and thinking about how to engineer those interfaces, and really thinking about like, okay, we have all this great calendar view. How can people reuse it? How can people use reoccurring events with just focusing on how to provide the events to the interface and not have to worry about the rest of the chain is a very powerful piece of software. And I think that Plone for Artists calendar has, people think it's like, the name, we had to decide on a name, so it's like, well, is it just for artists? Well, that's just how it started, but it's actually had this very sort of general piece of general use software. Yes?
Adding it to a build-out,
Yes?
you had mentioned that earlier. What is the main egg that would pull in all the others, or do you have to?
Oh, yeah. I wish I could show you. Yeah.
Okay, and that'll pull in all the other dependencies?
Yes. I just want to see if I can find that for you. Should be one of those two. Yeah. So if you grab the build-out, P4A build-out from SVN trunk, you'll get all the necessary stuff to just get started and look at it. So these are all the sort of source eggs that come with it. Here's my theme that I was going to demonstrate, but obviously I did not install it and got ahead of myself. So. Okay. So to do, come to Sprint. We need all this stuff: microformats, iCal, UI work, and we need lots of tests. And for further reading, check out these very, very smart folks. Thank you.